Let it end today.
My name is Tiravik, and I am the last archive keeper of the Velari Consolidated Worlds. I do not say this with pride. I say it with the hollow certainty of a man who watched his civilization's spine crack in slow motion over 700 millennia. The war between the Velari and the Kaithrani began before my species had even discovered written language. That is not an exaggeration. Our earliest cave paintings, the ones that predate everything, the ones we found deep beneath the crust of our homeworld, depict the Kaithrani. Black figures, angular, coming from the sky. 700,000 years. That is how long two species fought over a cluster of 17 star systems that none of them originally evolved in. The Velari colonized them first. The Kaithrani claimed they had an older claim from a precursor civilization. Neither side could prove anything. Neither side would back down. I have read every treaty, every ceasefire, every atrocity report, every casualty figure. The numbers stopped meaning anything around year 40,000. By year 200,000, both species had forgotten what peace even looked like, not metaphorically, literally. The concept asterisk of peace had been culturally erased. Our languages lost the word for it. We had to reconstruct it from archaeological records just to write it into diplomatic proposals that we knew would fail. By year 500,000, the war had become institutional. It was not fought for territory anymore. It was fought because fighting was what we asterisk did. The military-industrial complexes of both civilizations had become the entire economies. If you stopped fighting, your civilization would collapse within a generation, not from enemy action, from structural failure. We had built a machine that could not be turned off. I know this because I tried to turn it off. I was one of the architects of the ceasefire of year 612,844. It lasted 11 days. Then a Kaithrani cruiser captain, who, we later learned, had not even received the order to stand down because his communication relay had been destroyed in a battle 3 years prior, fired on a Velari supply convoy. 70 billion dead in the retaliation that followed. 11 days of peace, the longest in 600,000 years. I stopped trying after that. By year 698,000, the Velari Consolidated Worlds controlled 9 star systems. The Kaithrani Dominion controlled 8. The borders had not moved in over 100,000 years. The war had achieved perfect equilibrium, a grinding, eternal stalemate in which both sides bled at precisely the same rate. It was stable. It was also extinction in slow motion. Both species' populations had declined by 60%. Our birth rates were collapsing. Our genetic diversity was cratering. We were, by any reasonable metric, dying. But the war continued. Because the war was all we were. The first anomalous signal was detected on cycle 699,812, day 47, by a Velari deep space monitoring array positioned at the edge of consolidated territory. It was not Kaithrani. That in itself was enough to trigger a fleet-wide alert. In 700,000 years, there had never been a third signal. The galaxy, as far as either species had ever determined, was empty except for the Velari and the Kaithrani. We had searched. Oh, how we had searched. Every promising star system, every anomalous electromagnetic signature, every hint of artificial construction. Nothing, ever, just silence and rock and the cold between stars. The signal was coming from the galactic south, outside the contested zone, from a region of space that both species had written off as empty generations ago. It was a narrowband transmission, tightly focused, clearly artificial. It contained mathematical primes, basic atomic structures, and after our linguists spent 3 sleepless cycles decrypting it, a greeting. Not a threat, not a declaration, a asterisk greeting. We are humanity, we come in peace, we wish to communicate. I remember reading those words in the archive, and feeling something I had not felt in centuries. Of fear. Not of the signal itself, of what it represented, because I understood with the cold clarity that comes from being very old and very tired that a third party entering this war zone would not fix anything. It would just add another body to the grinder. I was wrong. I have never been so wrong about anything in my very long life. The human vessel arrived at the neutral station of Verath Point, a derelict way station that both sides had agreed to use for diplomatic exchanges, though it had not been actively used in over 40,000 years, or 47 cycles after the initial signal. It was small. That was the first thing every observer noted. The human ship was roughly the size of a Velari light freighter. It was not military, it had no visible weapons. Its hull was smooth and unmarked, and it moved with a quiet precision that suggested advanced propulsion, but not advanced armor asterisk. The Velari delegation, I was not part of it, but I read the transcripts within hours, consisted of 12 diplomats, 6 military advisors, and a security detail of 40. The Keithrani delegation was of similar composition. The humans sent 3. 3 individuals walked onto the docking platform of Verath Point, and I will tell you what they looked like because it matters. They were bipedal, roughly 1.7 to 1.9 meters in height, soft-skinned, no natural armor, no claws, no venom, no bioelectric defense organs. They had 2 eyes, 2 ears, and a mouth. They were, by any objective biological assessment, among the most physically vulnerable sentient species one could imagine. They were also smiling. The lead human, a female named, according to the transcript, Ambassador Kira Okonkwo, extended her hand. This was a gesture our xenolinguists had not prepared us for, but she explained it calmly. It's a greeting from our world, she said through the translator. It means we come openly, no weapons, no deception. The Velari lead diplomat stared at the hand for 11 seconds before responding. The Keithrani lead diplomat did not respond at all. Ambassador Okonkwo lowered her hand without embarrassment and proceeded to speak for 2 hours. She explained that humanity had been observing the Velari-Keithrani conflict for approximately 18 of their years. She explained that they had spent that time studying the history, the culture, the economics, and the military capabilities of both species. She explained that they had not intervened sooner because they had wanted to be certain they understood the situation fully before acting. She then said something that made every diplomat in the room go very still. We know why the war hasn't ended, and we know how to end it. The Velari delegate, Councillor Morvex, asked the obvious question. How? Ambassador Okonkwo looked at him, and her expression, the transcripts all note this, was not triumphant. It was not condescending, it was asterisk sad asterisk. You're not going to like it, she said. The humans laid out their proposal over the following 3 cycles. It was, in essence, this. Humanity had identified that the Velari-Keithrani War was no longer driven by political grievance, territorial dispute, or even cultural animosity. It was driven by economic structural dependency. Both civilizations had reorganized themselves entirely around perpetual warfare. Their energy grids, their supply chains, their labor allocations, their research priorities, all of it was oriented toward sustaining the conflict. Ending the war peacefully would cause immediate catastrophic collapse of both civilizations' economies, resulting in famines, infrastructure failures, and likely billions of deaths from secondary causes. Both species knew this. It was not a secret. It was the primary argument used by war hawks on both sides to justify continuing the fight. If we stop, we die anyway. The humans said, what if you don't have to die? Humanity, it turned out, had spent those 18 years not just studying the war but preparing an industrial framework. a complete pre-engineered economic transition plan for both asterisk civilizations simultaneously. They had designed replacement energy grids that could be built using existing manufacturing infrastructure. They had mapped alternative supply chains. They had drafted conversion plans for military production facilities. They had even designed new agricultural systems optimized for both Velari and Keithrani biology. All of it was offered freely. No conditions, no terms, no concessions required. The humans just wanted the war to stop. I read the full proposal in the archive. It was over 14,000 pages long. The level of detail was staggering. They had analyzed mineral deposits in systems neither species had bothered to survey. They had calculated conversion timelines down to the individual cycle. They had identified potential failure points and prepared contingencies. 18 years. They had done all of this in 18 years. The Velari Council debated the proposal for 11 cycles. The Keithrani Dominion debated it for 14. Both rejected it. The reasons were predictable. The Velari military command argued that accepting human aid would be tantamount to surrendering sovereignty. The Keithrani religious authorities declared that the humans were clearly an instrument of Velari deception, since no species could genuinely act altruistically. Both sides' intelligence agencies produced reports, conflicting, contradictory, and largely fabricated, suggesting that the human proposal was a prelude to invasion. I watched the debates from the archive. I said nothing. What was there to say? I had seen this before. Every ceasefire, every peace proposal, every diplomatic overture in 700,000 years had died the same death. Not because the solutions were bad, but because the machinery of war had become so entrenched that it could consume any alternative and spit out the bones. I closed the archive terminal that night and sat in the dark for a long time. War had won again, as it always had, as it always would. I was preparing my final entry, a chronological record of the war's 700,000th year, to be buried in the deepest vault, a testament to failure when the second signal arrived. It was not a greeting this time. Minute 0. At exactly 03:17:44 Standard Galactic Time, every Velari military installation, every Keithrani military installation, and every piece of autonomous military hardware in the contested zone simultaneously lost primary power. Not destroyed, not attacked, deactivated. Weapons systems went dark, shield generators shut down, propulsion systems on military vessels went offline. Communication networks used exclusively by military forces collapsed. Civilian infrastructure was untouched. Not a single civilian power grid flickered. Not a single hospital lost power. Not a single agricultural system was disrupted. Only the war machine died. Minute 3. Panic, absolute panic on both sides. Military command structures tried to switch to backup systems. The backups were also down. They tried manual overrides. The manual overrides had been subverted, not destroyed, just rewritten. Every fail-safe, every redundant system, every protocol designed to keep military assets functioning in the event of primary failure, all of it had been reprogrammed. The humans had not just turned off the switch. They had rewritten the wiring so the switch could never be turned on again. Minute 7. The first reports came in from the border. Velari soldiers stationed at forward positions reported seeing Keithrani soldiers, their enemies for 700,000 years, standing outside their own bunkers, looking just as confused and frightened as they were. No one fired, no one could fire. The weapons were paperweights. Minute 12. Both species' leadership attempted to contact the human vessel. All military communication channels were down, so they had to use civilian networks, something that had not been done for strategic communications in over 100,000 years. The human vessel responded immediately. Minute 15. Ambassador Okonkwo's voice came through on every civilian frequency in the contested zone. Her tone was calm, measured. The same sad expression that the diplomats had seen at Verath Point was audible in her voice, even through translation algorithms. We told you we knew how to end it. You rejected the peaceful path. That was your right. But we are not going to sit by and watch two species annihilate themselves over a war that none of you even remember starting. We have disabled every weapon, every warship, every military system in the contested zone. Not destroyed, disabled. The moment a lasting peace agreement is signed, we will reverse every change we've made. Your militaries will be restored exactly as they were. Until then, you cannot fight. And since you cannot fight, you have no choice but to talk. Minute 19. The first Keithrani soldier crossed the no-man's land between the forward positions at Callistra Basin. He was unarmed, he was shaking. He walked, not ran, walked to the Velari line and stood there. The Velari soldiers stared at him. One of them, a corporal named Thessal, whose name I will remember forever, stepped forward. They looked at each other for a long moment. Then Thessal said, in a voice that was barely audible on the recording, "I don't remember why we're fighting." The Keithrani soldier, later identified as Private Cavith, said, "Neither do I." Minute 23. Similar scenes began occurring across the contested zone. Not everywhere, not yet, but in dozens of locations along the border, soldiers who had been trained for generations to kill each other found themselves standing in silence, unarmed, with nothing to do but be there. Some wept, some sat down, some just stared at the sky. Minute 27. The Velari Supreme Council convened an emergency session. Without military channels, they had to do it via civilian video relay. The footage is extraordinary. The most powerful individuals in the consolidated worlds, sitting in a room with no armies, no fleets, no weapons, looking at each other with an expression I can only describe as *naked*. They had spent 700,000 years behind the shield of military power. In 27 minutes, that shield had been removed and they were just people. Fragile, soft, vulnerable people in a room with no way to compel anyone to do anything. Counselor Morvex, the same diplomat who had been at Verath Point, spoke first. "I think," he said very quietly, "we should talk to the Keithrani." Minute 31. The Keithrani Dominion Council, in a nearly identical scene, reached T. He same conclusion simultaneously. Archprelate Venix, who had been the loudest voice rejecting the human proposal, sat in silence for a full minute before speaking. "The humans," he said, "they could have destroyed us." No one responded because it was true. The humans had demonstrated that they could reach into every military system both species possessed and shut them down simultaneously, without a single shot fired, without a single casualty, without damaging a single civilian structure. They had done it in an instant across 17 star systems against two civilizations that had been perfecting the art of war for 700,000 years. If they had wanted to conquer, they could have done so at minute 0. Instead, they had turned off the guns and asked the children to stop fighting. Minute 35. The two councils agreed to meet, not through intermediaries, not through diplomatic protocols that hadn't been used in millennia, in person, at Verath Point. The logistics were a nightmare. Neither side had maintained civilian transport capable of crossing the contested zone in decades. They had to ask the humans for a ride. The humans, of course, said yes. Minute 38. Ambassador Okonkwo addressed both councils jointly for the second time. Her words were brief. "You're going to want to assign blame. You're going to want to find someone to punish for this humiliation. Don't. There is no villain here. There are two species that got trapped in a cycle and a third species that had the ability to break it. That's all. The proposal we offered before still stands, every page of it. We will help you rebuild, we will help you transition. We will ask for nothing in return except that you remember this moment not with shame but with clarity. You were not weak, you were trapped, and now you are free. Minute 40. The ceasefire was declared. It was not a treaty, it was not a formal document. It was Counselor Morvex looking at Archprelate Venix across a table on a derelict space station and saying, "The war is over." And Venix, after the longest pause of his life, saying, "Oh yes, I am writing this entry 43 years after the 40 minutes. The peace has held. Not perfectly, there have been incidents, disagreements, and one genuinely frightening border skirmish that was resolved before it could escalate. But it has held. The human economic transition plan worked. Not flawlessly, there were disruptions, shortages, and a difficult first decade, but it worked. Today, the Velari Consolidated Worlds and the Keithrani Dominion operate separate but cooperative civilian economies. Trade flows between them for the first time in 700,000 years. Our populations are recovering. Our cultures are rediscovering things, art, music, philosophy, play, that had been nearly extinguished by centuries of total militarization. The humans kept their word. Every disabled military system was restored after the peace agreement was formalized. They did not keep backdoors, they did not retain control. They gave us back our weapons and walked away. I asked Ambassador Okonkwo during one of her periodic visits to the archive why they had done it. Why they had invested 18 years studying a war that wasn't theirs, prepared a 14,000-page economic plan for two species they had never met, and then, when that plan was rejected, executed a military operation of breathtaking precision and then asked for nothing. She was quiet for a long time. "Because we've been where you are," she said. "Not for 700,000 years, we're not that old, but we've fought wars that seemed like they would never end. We've built machines that seemed like they couldn't be stopped. And we know what it feels like to be trapped inside something you built yourself and realize you can't find the door." "We found the door," she said, "and when we saw you couldn't find yours, we couldn't just walk past." I asked her one more question. I asked if she had been afraid not of the Velari or the Keithrani, but of failing, of intervening in a 700,000-year war and making it worse. She smiled, not the diplomatic smile she wore in public, a real one, small and tired and honest. "Terrified," she said, "for 18 years straight. I am the last archive keeper of the Velari Consolidated Worlds. Soon I will not need to be. The archive is being converted into a public historical library. Children will be able to walk through these halls and read about the war that defined our species for 700,000 years. They will not understand it. That is the greatest gift I can imagine. I have spent my entire life documenting death. I have cataloged every battle, every casualty report, every atrocity, every failed peace. 700,000 years of suffering compressed into data crystals that fill this room from floor to ceiling. And it ended in 40 minutes. Not because of a weapon, not because of a treaty, not because of a great leader or a philosophical awakening or a shift in the balance of power. Because a species we had never met looked at us and decided that we deserved to live. I do not have the words for what that means. My language, a language that lost the word for peace and had to rebuild it from dust, does not have words for this. But I will try. Thank you. Archive entry 699,855. Final record. A keeper Tiravik 7th lineage. A status closed. Author's note, the Velari word for peace, Thelari, was reconstructed in year 412,000 from pre-war cave inscriptions. It originally meant the time after the sky stops burning. After the 40 minutes, the Velari Linguistic Council voted unanimously to redefine it. The new definition translates roughly to what the humans brought us.